Testing, testing, testing. Ah, hey, does this look smooth to people, or is it bad? All right, we are 1 minute away. Okay, we're going to do this. So I'm hoping everybody can see just fine. Let us know if not, and Fred will let me know if anyone has some problems with it. So I want to thank everyone very, very much for showing up, not only for this session, but also the sessions before it. And I'm finding out that there are some amazing folks who are capturing all the sessions, which is pretty cool because, you know, we have great badges and stuff for you by doing that. So let me just jump in because we don't have much time. Let me minimize things and get it out of the way. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about responsive web design. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing. The topic itself tends to be a slightly more meta versus, hey, here's a technology and we're going to dissect it feature by feature. So one of the things that you will probably get is that we'll be talking about a variety of device issues. What do browser widths look like, things like that. But I promise you that if you hold off, you'll be seeing a little bit of code. You'll be seeing some math as well. So it will be good. So just hang in there. The stuff that you see here, my name is Thomas Lewis. I'm a technical evangelist with Microsoft Canada. If you want to hear more from me, you can always subscribe to me at Tommy Lee. The blog, asimplepixel.tumblr.com, is one that you may want to write down just because I have all of the content that I'm talking about as well as the links that I'm going to show you up there already if you would like to follow along at home. So how has it that we've viewed the web? If you think about it, we've basically thought of the web in the past few years as the desktop browser, right? You know, if you talk to my parents, for example, when I say, hey, go to the web, they're like, huh? And I go to Internet Explorer, and they're like, huh? And I go, click on the blue E, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of their world as far as the web goes. But what we're seeing that just in the past few years, we've had this sort of proliferation of devices. So we not only have things like desktop browsers now, but we have these mobile browsers, which if I remember correctly, actual mobile browsing in browsers has actually surpassed desktop browsers, if I'm not mistaken. But then we're also seeing things like, hey, people are looking at televisions and game consoles, and all of these things are, sort of connected. But maybe we're not necessarily looking at pages the same way we did back in the internet TV days, where we assumed that someone would just bring up a page on your television and kind of read things from there. So it's kind of cool that we have this ability, but what's the problem? Well, let me show you. I think always a good way to kind of demonstrate the goodness of something is to show kind of the bad of stuff. Now, what I used to do is I actually used to show off someone else's website, and I got in a little bit of trouble for that. So what I decided to do instead was I will just basically show you my website. So this is your typical, blog, asimplepixel.tumblr.com. Scroll down, it's the usual stuff, nice little blog pieces, various things. For example, here is the responsive web design content if you're interested in checking it out, along with a lot of the links, and I'll have some additional links to add there as well. Um, but one of the things that you may notice here is that the content itself that we're interested in are actually a small part of the width that we have. So used to back in the day, we all kind of dealt with the, oh, the recommended, device width is 800 by 600 when we're building out websites. And what's interesting here is that, if you look at my site, there's quite a bit of white space that's not being used. Now, that's not to say that you should use every single bit of white space that you have, but we got to remember that people are coming to the website for content and to get to that content. And if I actually take a look at the content, so here I'm going to go ahead and bring up the F12 tool. So if you're in Internet Explorer, you hit F12, you get the developer tools here. One of the things that's nice is that we have a nice little ruler here. So I can go ahead and say show ruler. We're going to make it red so that we can see it. And if you notice, if I kind of create my ruler across the entire browser width, you'll notice that I have about 1,333 pixels to play with, which is a fairly decent amount, and you can imagine on a bigger widescreen monitor, it's probably even more. But if I take a look at the content itself is only 506 pixels. So you can see that I'm not really even using half of the space that I have available to me. Also, one of the things, let's get rid of the F12 tools here, is that if I was to be on a smaller width device or on, basically, kind of a, mobile device that would be much smaller, what happens? So for example, if I start pulling the browser window in, I'm okay, but notice that all of a sudden I start going over my content. So that means that if someone comes to my site with a mobile device or with a device with a small width, they're not going to be able to see my content, and that's not a very good thing. So I think we can kind of see just from what we have here that we could do much better, and hopefully with responsive web design, I'll be able to show you that. So we were very fortunate because back in 2010, a gentleman named Ethan Marcotte, and if you've not ever followed him on Twitter, I definitely think you should. I think I think it's Beep, or you can go to @RWD as well. But he's a designer who really started thinking about, how do we create websites that respond to the device capabilities? So what he did was he wrote this sort of quintessential post on Listapart called Responsive Web Design, where he talked about this and said, hey, I think that there's a way that, because of the proliferation of devices, and again, we may not know what those device, capabilities are. What can we do about that? So he came up with this concept of responsive web design, and it's really sort of taken off in the community. And really what responsive web design does is it kind of tells us to think of our users' needs instead of ours, right? Because what we've been able to have the luxury of doing is to just kind of come up with a arbitrary, device width, for example, 960 pixels, that we just kind of said, oh, okay, as long as I'm not, have a width of 960 pixels, I can stay, just simply to that. And that really wasn't taking advantage of the user's needs, right? Because the users need everything from 200 pixel widths to 5,000 pixel widths, as far as we know. Also, we need to adapt to various device capabilities instead of configurations. So this kind of comes up a lot when people are developing apps for mobile, that they get kind of freaked out because they go, oh my gosh, there's hundreds of devices and they all have different resolutions, they have different device width and device heights. How do we even begin to sort of think about that, right? Think about it this way: could you could you do a visual comp for each and every one of those? It'd take you forever. The other thing is that we need to sort of help future-proof our sites, because what you see today is a lot of times, how many times have you gone to like a banking site or just basically any site, and you're using kind of a modern web browser, and it tells you like, oh, sorry, this isn't the right version, or all of a sudden everything is all mismatched and aligned. Well, responsive web design tries to help future-proof our sites so that we sort of don't, try to, anticipate the devices. Instead, we say, okay, we're just going to see what the device can do, and then we will create an experience based on that. So I showed you the anti-pattern. I showed you why responsive web design is interesting. Now let's actually look at people who do a great job of responsive web designs. So let's go back here. So the first one I'm going to show you is one of my favorites. It's called the Sasquatch Music Festival that they have every year that here in Washington. And so this is sort of your typical, your typical, band kind of not conference. I'm way too built into the tech stuff. But no, a music festival, right? So here, for example, you see the, rather large, the large header here. You see the navigation right here, a little more navigation there as well. Scroll down, you see artists, and then of course, as we scroll down, we also see, blog posts. Over here, we even see a lot of ads. And then if we scroll all the way down, you'll notice that we have this nice little footer with all the cool information on who's producing it, as well as a nice kind of fun little vector drawing here. But as you can imagine, not everyone, may have, 1,300 pixels, wide. They may not have, even, 200 pixels wide because they may be looking on a mobile device. So what if we were to kind of take this site and actually bring the width down? So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the window here on the right, and I'm going to pull in, and you'll notice that, at a certain point, it then changes, right? So what they did was you'll notice that they kind of, started to do things a little smaller. Maybe instead of having multiple, whoops, a little bit of a bug there. But you'll notice that they start pulling things in just slightly more. And then if we go in real close, you'll notice that they actually have a very small width that they work with. So you'll notice that the logo is much smaller, that they've simplified the navigation here. Now everything is in one column versus, multiple columns. You can even see that the footer now has changed a bit. So what they've done is they've said that, hey, we realize that someone could come in with a device width that's much smaller. How can we take, how can we make sure that they have a good experience? Now, this isn't just for kind of people, designer blogs and, cool conferences and things like that. There are folks like the Boston Globe, for example, who've kind of taken advantage of this as well. So you can see here that, this is sort of your traditional newspaper, website. But again, as we go in and pull in, you'll notice that it starts to make changes based on what the width is. And so as I pull in, you'll notice that now again we've gone back from multiple columns to just one columns. And even you'll notice that some changes are made, for example, like the line spacing between those, so that as the expectation is if the device width is much smaller, we may want to change that line spacing so that we make it easier to see. And so that's just another example. And then the final example I'm going to show you is this is just a cool site. One day I had a friend of mine who was like, how would you like to see a German site that includes a cat, a chicken, a dog, and a donkey? And I was like, I'm in. I don't care what it's about. I gotta see this. And he said it had to do with responsive web design, so I knew it was safe for work. But notice that what's kind of cool is that as I pull in here, it actually starts changing things, right? So we lost a little bit of the navigation that's needed. And in the smaller version, we now, instead of having multiple items, we just have very simple items. But one of the cool things that they did was that as you pull down on the content, it actually changes the background. So now you have a chicken sitting on top of a cat, sitting on top of a dog, sitting on top of a donkey. How cool is that? So like I said, responsive web design can be very good for just like, hey, how do we naturally put layout together? But it also can be cool when you have like, chickens sitting on cats, sitting on dogs, sitting on donkeys. And again, all of these links I will be making available to you as well. So what do we need to do to create a responsive web design? Well, Ethan Marcotte came up with sort of 3 tenets, and those are the 3 tenets we're going to talk about as we actually drill down into the meat of the presentation. One is that he said you have to create a flexible grid-based layout. Also, you need your images and media to be flexible, right? Because what we don't want is, super large images, on a site that, can't support the size of those images. Then he also said that we need to use media queries, and you're going to love media queries as we talk about it. And then there's this 4th thing, which I will tell you about. I'll leave you in suspense. So first, for flexible grid-based layout, we've kind of talked about the problems with when we have non-responsive websites. But one of the things that we have to deal with a lot is that the design tools tend to use pixels as its unit of measurement. So a lot of times when the developers out there, when you get something from your designer, the designer says, well, this thing has to be, 200 pixels wide by this many pixels deep and things like that. But what's kind of interesting is we all kind of know that sometimes a pixel does not equal a pixel, and we can leave that for another discussion. So what we have to do is we have to basically turn sort of these pixels into a counterpart that can kind of, expand and contract with the rest of the site. So what we do is instead of using pixels as our measurement, we can actually use EMs as our counterparts. Now, the thing is, well, how do we do that? Well, the good news is that Ethan Marcotte put together an algorithm for this to simply do this. And it's just a simple mathematical statement. And this is the statement. And so what we'll do is we'll go through each and every one of these through the rest of the session. No, I'm just kidding with you. Actually, it's a lot easier than that. All you have to remember is that the target divided by the context will equal the result we want. So what do we mean by that? So if you look at this page, here we have responsive web design, read more at the top. This is probably what we would want to put on our site, where we would have sort of this, H1 tag for the responsive web design, and then we would have an anchor tag for the read more. And what we would want to do is we would want to size them appropriately. And so here, for example, you notice in the top left in column 1, we have an H1 with a font size of 24. Okay, so that's our target that we're dealing with. Now what we want to do is we want to convert it to our M counterpart. So the way we do that again is we take the target, which is 24 pixels, divided by the context, which is 16. Now you may be saying, well, wait a minute, where did the 16 come from? Because we know we want the responsive web design piece of this to be 24 pixels, so that header. How do we actually, where did 16 come from? Well, 16 comes from the default font size in most browsers. So we're using that as our context. And then what we do is we simply divide the two, and then now you see in the 3rd column in the top row, our H1, we just put a font size of 1.5 M. And then we now have responsive web design, scaled appropriately. Now, the good news is that we can also deal with percentages as well. So what we can do, for example, for our anchor tag, because the read more is actually going to be smaller than the responsive web design, H1, is we can go ahead and say, hey, we know we have our anchor tag. Right now, it's the font size is 24 pixels, and we don't want it that way big. We actually want it much smaller. So what we'll do is we'll take the target, which is 11, and we've chosen that kind of arbitrarily because it makes it look good. We're going to divide it by 24 because now our context is based on the H1, and we're going to divide those. And now what we do is we just simply in our code for that anchor tag, we just say font colon and then the 0.458333333. So One of the things that I will recommend to you is not to round, because a lot of people, what they do is they see this big number and they go, oh, I should just go ahead and round it to 0.46. You don't really need to do that. The browsers do a great job of handling that math for you. So if you ever feel the need to round, really you don't need to do that. Now, I went through that math thing kind of fast, but do remember that this is probably the most difficult part of responsive web design. So it'll take a little while to get a handle of it, but the good news is you can actually search around, and there's people who have calculators now that will kind of convert these pixels to ems for you if you look around. Now, you may have noticed earlier I said, well, we need to create a responsive grid. So how do we sort of take a grid and kind of convert that to its responsive counterpart? Well, here, if you look, this is kind of what a typical CSS would look like in a blog. So here we would have a page overall, then we would have a blog on the main column would be for our content, and then maybe on the right side we would have another column. Then what we do is we actually go ahead and convert those, and that's what you're seeing in that second column. So we're going to take our width, because we're going to kind of keep the blog to 900. The context is 960, and then you can kind of see how that math works out. So on the right-hand side, you'll notice that we now are dealing with widths that are using percentages instead. So you can do these kind of pixel to M based conversions, either based on individual things like H1s and anchor tags and things like that, but you can also use it on kind of much bigger layout pieces or divs that you have, like we have here with the blog. So the second piece of the puzzle is flexible images and media. And what's nice is that Ethan Marcotte started kind of trying to figure out, like, well, what do I do about sizing various images? And the cool thing that came from this is that if you put a max width property of 100% on an image tag, it will scale it for you. So if your browser, window is smaller, it's going to go ahead and deal with that. And what was nice was this didn't only work on images, but it also worked on other media like video and other stuff like that. So this is kind of a real simple trick that you can do on all your images to get them to scale appropriately in the container that the image is in as well, so that you don't have this big image kind of overflowing the rest of the page. Now, what's kind of interesting is that if you are kind of the fan of going out to the web and reading all the blogs on responsive web design, this particular tenet of responsive web design is probably the one that gets most people riled up and excited. And the reason why is because as of today, what people have been doing is they've been just kind of saying, oh, okay, I'm going to take the largest image that I think I'm going to need, and then I'll just use that, I'll use that image max width, and it'll go ahead and shrink it down. Well, the problem with this, as you can imagine, is if you're on a mobile device and you hit a page that has tons of high-res imagery, well, your mobile device is now starting to shake, and smoke is coming out the top of it, and that's not good. So there's a lot of folks who have been working on, how do we deal with this issue? So for example, the Filament Group actually came out with a really cool tool that depends on cookies and JavaScript being enabled, but will actually sort of, interrogate and say, okay, what is sort of the device, that is, calling this page, and based on those characteristics, I'll go ahead and feed back the appropriately sized image. And so there's a lot of these different libraries that are out there. You can go out there and, type in responsive web design, image resizing, and you'll find quite a few of them. There's I think there's a few jQuery ones that are out there as well. The good news is that the browser vendors, though, are beginning to think about this and actually coming up with ways that we can handle this just via in the browser. So be aware that you will have to deal with that the max width doesn't resize your image. All it does is it just just shrinks it down visually. All right. Now we're on to the third element of responsive web design, which is media queries, and this is my favorite thing. When I first started kind of researching HTML5 and CSS3 and what all of it was about, there was some interesting stuff. Yeah, there was a new video tag, and there were there were various things to look at. But it wasn't until I looked at media queries that I was like, wow, this is some cool stuff. So if you think about it, not so long ago, we had the ability to define media types. So within our CSS, we could say, hey, this is meant for screen or this is meant for print. Go ahead and style this page in a certain way. But the problem was that these didn't easily respond to a user's display because, again, the display could be a variety of things on a variety of different devices. To get it to work, we actually had to do a lot of grunt work. And then, honestly, around this time, we didn't think about mobile devices that much, because we kind of would laugh, why would someone want to, browse the web, on a mobile device? Little did we know back then. So what happened was that the W3C and a good group of people came together and specified this CSS3 media queries module, which basically did what it says here. It specifies methods to enable web developers to scope a style sheet to a set of precise device capabilities. So what this basically means is that we can query the device that's pulling a page from our website and say, what are the characteristics, what are the capabilities you have, and then we can go ahead and style our content based on that. And the way we do that is simply this. Within our CSS, we define a media query. So here, for example, I'm saying that, the media type is of screen and that the max width is 600 pixels. And what this means is that if the device that is, looking at our page is under 600 pixels, well, then what we'll do is we'll apply a font size of 80% to what's in the body element. Simple enough. The other cool thing, for example, is that you can actually go in and do a variety of other queries. So here, for example, I can say, well, if the device width is between 320 pixels and 480 pixels, then go ahead and style the page in this way. And then, and don't think of it just as styling the page, as in, hey, we're going to change colors or stuff like that. But we can even change the layout, and I'll show you an example of that here in a little while. But we can also do not semantics, we can do ands and ors and other types of things. So you have kind of a lot of query options that you can do. Now, the thing is that you have to declare, your media queries, and there's a variety of places you can do it. One of the probably the most usual ways is in the style sheet itself, but you can also do an import rule and links in the web pages themselves that you want to have media queries in. The recommended for most cases is in the style sheet. And a lot of that, I think one of the best reasons, or at least for me when I'm doing development, is that I'm very aware of the media queries and what they are attached to. Also, if I need to make a change to all the web pages based on the media queries on a site, I can do that in one place versus having to go to the website and go, oh, now I need to change this query on all the HTML pages. So I find that it's just a lot more manageable to use, and it just fits my workflow a lot better. And so you'll see most people will put it in the style sheet, even though I'll show you an example of where they used it somewhere else. Now, so I talk a lot about device width, and what I hope that you don't take away from this is that this is only about device width. That it's all about just kind of taking your IE browser or whatever browser you're using, grabbing that right side and just jamming it back and forth. No, that's not what people are doing with responsive web design. But what we do have is the ability to say, okay, based on a lot of different properties, I can I can style and lay out my page in different ways and for different devices. So what you'll find though is most people are going to work with max width, max height, device height. Some people will use orientation as well. So on tablet devices and again on mobile devices, a lot of times when you're going from horizontal to vertical, what you'll want to do is to fire off a media query to say, hey, has the orientation changed? If so, I want to rearrange things or style things in a different way. There's also others things that you see here, probably not used as much, but still able to use nonetheless. And there are people working with the W3C again to make sure that we have some additional media properties that we can inspect as well. So now let's jump into a demo. I'm going to show you the Little P Bakery here. So the Little P Bakery is a website. Oops. Sorry, Little P Bakery is a website that actually is a sample site built from an amazing, amazing book that I'm going to give you a link to a little bit later on. This is kind of my go-to book for CSS3 development and does an amazing job talking about media queries. So what I want to do is just to show you this sample site. We'll actually kind of delve into the code a little bit. So this is sort of a simple little, bakery, site. Here you see, at the top we have our logo, we've got our search bar, we've got navigation here on the left. We have content here in the center with nice, imagery, and then 3 columns here. Over here we have sort of this sidebar thing as well. So of course, now that you're familiar with responsive web design, you're probably going to, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're probably going to want to grab that right side and start pulling it in. And so what happens, you'll notice, is that we get to a certain device width and it changes a bit, right? So what did change? Well, notice that our navigation that was on the left has now moved to the top right. And the reason why is because, we realize that, oh, we don't have a lot of space, so we want to kind of put it in a place that makes a lot of sense. Then, as we scroll in a little more, you'll notice that our navigation is about to hit our logo, which isn't something that we want to do. So what happens there? Well, we actually go ahead and bring it under the logo. Also notice that we've kind of started squeezing things a bit here on our content. But as we move in more, we start changing that up, right? We go from a 3-column layout to a more horizontal list view here with our imagery on the left-hand side. Then if I pull in even tighter, let's go back up, you'll notice that we now make some changes, right? That we now just go ahead and float those navigation items so that they now just sort of wrap around in sort of a tag cloud. Notice here that our actual imagery has now shrunk down, and we actually went out and got new images for that. And then we've taken a lot of the stuff that was in that second column and have now appended it to the bottom. So this is kind of a nice little page. Again, you have the ability to go check this out. I have the links made available to you, but you can also Google Bing it. If you type in Little P Bakery, you'll find it as well. So let's go in and take a look at some of the code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit the F12 here, and we'll go into the script here. And you'll notice here that she actually put in the style into the HTML page, which of course we would prefer it to be in a CSS page, but this is just a demo for now, so we'll let that be. But if we scroll down to the bottom, one of the things we'll start to see is our media queries, and so it takes a while. And there we go. So here is where she laid out the media queries. And so here, for example, the first media query states that, hey, is this media of type screen, and is the minimum width 1200 pixels? So what she's done here is she's decided that, okay, my default is going to be, do they have a large screen? And so you'll notice here that there's a lot of different stylings that happen for the main navigation if we're above 1200 pixels. And you can see here, here's the other items that have been changed. So for example, the content, main content now, the width is 58, the margins are at 18%, credits at 20%. Then what happens is that she set up a second one at 760 pixels. And so what's kind of cool, what's kind of interesting is that, she picked 760 pixels. And so you might scratch your head, well, why would she pick 760 pixels? Well, the reason why is because she was thinking in terms of, if I have a device, of course, that is under 760 pixels, which also happens to be the iPad, then I want to go ahead and do things a little differently. And what's kind of nice is you can actually, again, use the IE tools to test this when you're building responsive web designs. So here, for example, I'm just going to go ahead and show the ruler again, and I'm going to create a ruler. I'm going to go out to 760 pixels, or they're close to it. And now what's nice is that I can pull in, and what should happen is when I hit that 760 point, you'll notice that all of a sudden those changes kicked in that we were talking about before, with the navigation being moved under and things like that. So what I would recommend that you do is you use those rulers to test to make sure that those things are your media queries are firing off. And again, if we keep scrolling down, you can see that we just handle more and more. So, at some point where, if the max width is 550 pixels, then we'll do you'll notice that we change the background images that we use here. So we go from the 128 to the 64 bit imagery that we have. And what you should remember is that these media queries also use CSS's cascading functionality. So you'll notice that what happens is that if the first media query is false, then it just keeps going to the next ones and testing those out. So again, using CSS as it pretty much was intended to do. And we're going to actually come back to this website pretty shortly, but I wanted to show you some other things. So what about devices? Because here's what's going to happen. You are so enthralled and enthused by responsive web design. You're beside yourself. So what you do is you run home to your significant other. You tell them about responsive web design and how awesome it is, and you say, I'm sorry, honey, but I can't have dinner with you tonight. I need to go make my website or my blog responsive. And so you do that, and then of course you're taking your browser and you're grabbing that window and you're going left, right, and watching it kind of react to it, and you're really happy and excited about it. Then what happens is you pull out your mobile device and you go and you look up that URL that and you notice there hasn't been a change. And you're mad, right? Because you're like, hey, this dude that was on the internet told me, like, hey, I could do this and it's going to look awesome on my device. What the heck happened? Well, an interesting thing has happened in that what we have to do is we have to put in a meta tag in our HTML page, which is the viewport meta tag. And how this kind of came about is that with the proliferation, for example, of the iPhone, is that the device width that it says that it isn't actually its device width. And you might go, huh? What are you talking about? And what it is that because how mobile devices today, they automatically kind of respond, they make it kind of, they shrink it down and it looks really nice. And when you change the orientation, it scales real well. Well, what it does is it kind of fools the website into thinking that, oh, well, I'm really this kind of website so that it will deal, or I'm this kind of device so that it'll deal with it appropriately. So what you just need to do is you need to go in and add the viewport meta tag. So here, for example, in our example, she added this to the sample site. So with this right here. So what we did was we said this meta tag for viewport, and basically what you're doing is you're telling the device, hey, listen, I'm a mobile, aware app. I can handle. Uh, Thank you, sir. Um, One of the things that we can do is that we can say the width equals the device width. And so what we're basically saying is our website is built for mobile. The other thing that we do is we add maximum scale equals 1.0. And this is for orientation, right? Because what happens is that when you change the orientation, and again, this happens on a lot of the Apple devices, is that you change that orientation, and what it does is it doesn't say, oh, okay, I have a different set of pixels I can play with. Instead, it just, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and scale out. So the way to keep that from happening and overriding your CSS media queries is you can say maximum scale equals 1.0. So in the end, basically, I'm just saying this. Put in that viewport meta tag for your mobile devices, and you should be solid. Now, the CSS media queries is not supportive in all browsers, so if you unfortunately have to deal with older browser versions, I highly recommend CSS3 Media Queries JS by Wouter van der Graaf. It's kind of automagic in that all you do is you just include the script in your pages, and then it does all of the work for you. It parses the CSS, applies the style for positive media tests. And what's nice about this is that you can today just write your media queries just as if you were working on a modern browser, and then later you can come in, put in this script, and it'll just handle it for you. It is slightly heavy, and when I say heavy, that's a relative term. If you know that you're just going to use, something simple like hey, all I'm going to do is deal with device width. I'm not really interested in monochrome and things like that. Then you may want to look for a library called Response.js, which is a much lighter weight, but just doesn't have all the out of magic features. You have to write just a little bit more code. So again, that balance between automagicness and performance. You might say to yourself, Thomas, this sounds great. I'm into it, but do I really have to write all that CSS3 media queries myself? Hasn't someone just kind of already done it? Well, the good news is someone has. Andy Clark, who has written an awesome book called Hard-Boiled Web Design, he actually has a media query or a CSS file that you can use that's chock full of all the different media queries available to you. So this is the book I was telling you about earlier. This is a great, great book. I can't recommend it enough. And no, I don't get any dividends or anything from it or royalties from it. It's called Stunning CSS3. It's by Zoe Mickley-Gillenwater. This is a really excellent book and spends a lot of time on media queries and mobile and stuff like that. And the reason why I like this book is I'm a big book reader, digitally or analog. And what I like about this book is that it tends to be based on reality, right? So a lot of times what happens is, most books just kind of go feature by feature and just say, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. But they don't base it in reality, right? They're like, hey, when I do that, I can't just paste it into my code because now everything is off. She actually goes through sort of the fine details. So if you've kind of struggled with CSS3 and you just kind of feel that it's a little bit unwieldy, I absolutely recommend getting this book. Again, Stunning CSS3, amazing, amazing book, and it's one of those books I continue to, pull back out and read again on certain, topics. It's amazing stuff. There is a ton of people thinking about responsive web design. Smashing Magazine had a really great article here. Again, this link is going to be available to you, and it's available on my site as well, which has just a lot. This, again, article has a lot of amazing stuff. If you have some time in your day, you might want to check out MediaQueries.com. I'm sorry, Media Queries. It's a media query with the .es. And this is just a basic collection of responsive web designs. I'm telling you right now, unless you have an hour to spend, don't go there, because what you'll do is you'll go there, you'll click on these sites, and you'll be grabbing that right window, and you'll be going back and forth, checking these out. I can absolutely guarantee you that you will do that. if you're having problems sleeping at night, you can actually go read the media query spec up on the W3C site. And like I said, this gives you anything and absolutely everything about media queries. But like I said, it's a little bit, how we say, dry. And so finally, what was that fourth thing? Because you said, Thomas, there was these four things about responsive web design. What is the fourth? Well, it's interesting because Ethan has sort of said there's kind of this magical fourth thing, and what is that? And what I believe, and he has said as well, is that the fourth thing is design, right? Because now we have these challenges that we need to think about with responsive web design. So for example, when we now in our head start working on a website, do we think about that website being mobile, or should we think about it on the desktop? We need to think about, is it good that all sites are responsive? And then now, for example, what do we do about visual comps? Do we do a visual comp for every device that's out there? What we're seeing now is a lot of people are sort of skipping sort of the visual comps in Photoshop and going from wireframes to actual front-end code. Also, we have to remember mobile is not about walking and looking something up, kind of the person looking down at their phone and walking. Um, and then the other thing is we're at the beginning of responsive web design. So, not everything is figured out. We talked about the images and how we deal with that. But it is very interesting, and it's one of those things that isn't really going to go away. I think what we're going to find is that we're going to have customers asking for responsive sites, especially as they see more and more of them proliferating. Um, Also, Ethan Marcotte, the gentleman I've been talking about, he wrote a great book called Responsive Web Design. You can go to abookapart.com or basically anywhere these days, and you can go and get his book there. So we're at the end. I'm a little bit over. I apologize. Of course, you've been great. Please, get your badges. If you've been collecting them, of course, fill out the forms. We've got some amazing prizes. Oh my gosh, there's an Amex gift card of $500. I need to go get some badges. So thank you very much, and I'm going to stick around on the chat to help answer any questions that you may have. Thank you. Oh, and Fred is telling me I have 5 minutes more for questions, so I will just basically walk through him. So Robert asked, is that media queries media query with the .es? And the answer is yes. I'll post the link in IM. There you go. Oh, the badge. Sorry, folks. Let me get that for you. All right. We're excluding Quebec for some reason. That's not right. Let's see. Book, is that thing made of paper? Yes, I still enjoy analog, but the cool thing about all those books is that they are also available digitally. So it's funny, I actually have them all digitally, and then I also have them, in actual dead trees, as they say. Robert asked, what's the URL again and I'm assuming he meant the book, and it is, and I'm putting it in the chat window, abookapart.com. All of those books there, by the way, are absolutely great. What I like about them is they've actually kept them very small. They're only about 100 pages. What I always say about these books is they have spouse approval, meaning that you can kind of take one on a vacation or, to the mall and, whatever, wherever you're at, and your spouse is probably not going to get mad at you because it doesn't look like you're on your device or doing email, which is pretty cool. Let's see here. Now get a presenter from Europe and they will already be over. Oh, good question. About Blank said, can you deal with pixel density as well? Because some phones have similar resolution to tablets despite being very different sizes. Yes. So actually, there is a few things that you can do. There is a device aspect ratio that's used as well. So, for example, it was added, especially when we got like Retina displays, that you can use for that. So yes, absolutely. Uh, Watching Thomas' presentation saves you time also. It's only 11:40 in his taskbar. we F-Tools also don't see the rulers with the live cast. Weird. Sorry about that. I don't know why. But if you go hit F12 and go to Tools and click on Rulers, you'll see the rulers there. And again, it has like 4 different colors you can choose from. Okay. Are you seriously browsing the source with IE? Yes, I was, and actually, I I find I do that actually more often, because the thing is that um, I dealt a lot during our launch of IE9. I worked with a lot of customers who were building apps, and I would say that 90% of all the issues that they had I was able to solve through the F12 tools. I didn't show you the network tool, but like for example, I would be able to see if something was slow, why that was. So for example, I had someone who wasn't caching an audio file. So what was happening is every time something was happening in the page, it was trying to download this big, huge audio file again, and I actually used the network tab to see that coming over. Uh, Saratiki, glad you liked the demo, and Google Bing, yeah, that's a term that I like to use a lot, so feel free to use that as well. Nice, Harper's Land. I gotta find out about that. I'm still learning the Canadian geography. Matt B is touching himself. Get pictures of the. Was that close? Okay, I think we got just about everything. So we're definitely going to make all of this available to you on the site, as well as, like I said, you can go to uh, my my site as well. And Frederick is telling me that I can disconnect. So thank you very much. I will go ahead and disconnect now. And again, you can follow me at Tommy Lee. Talk to you all later, and thanks for checking it out. Bye-bye.